Thank you to everyone who's listening or watching this episode because today's amazing guest is Adam Fry Pierce. So who is Adam? Adam is a career-long community builder and design operator. He's currently the chief of staff at Google, where he manages strategic programs for Google's UX leadership. Adam has a non-linear career and has had multiple businesses over the years, a conference company, a design ops agency, a media company, and even a restaurant. Ooh. He's also an active partner in one of the largest design ops communities, if not the largest in the world, the DesignOps Assembly. Adam, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I know, dude. I cannot tell you, I've been traveling for the past 1 month. I started with Mexico, then went to Detroit, then went to San Francisco, then Austin, then Tennessee, and then I'm back in Dallas. And yesterday night, I was like, I think I'm so tired. I hope I recover in time to make it to this interview. So I'm so glad just to be here.
You made recovered. It. You made a very strange travel pattern there.
I know. Part of it was business. Part of it was just fun.
Yeah.
So, but just super excited to, just be here. And I know this is something I wanted for like a while. And I know we had like scheduling conflicts. So I'm just super happy that we're finally here. And for everyone who's wondering, one thing I'll say is be persistent. Be persistent.
Yeah.
And magical things will happen.
We found each other. Yeah, we got here.
So dude, have been working in areas that deal with talking to people, managing events and stuff. Talk to me about it. You've been doing this for a while.
Yeah. I mean, are you talking about design ops in general or kind of my story? Or where do you want me to start?
Like even your story, even before design ops, you were running a conference, you're running a media company. I'm assuming that has a lot to do with putting up events and organizing things for people or meeting people in general or talking to them.
Yeah, you mentioned events twice there. So I'm curious, are you correlating events into design ops, or why are you hitting on events? What are you trying to learn there?
Well, I guess the thing I'm kind of curious about is to me it seems like when I look at your career, even before design ops as design ops, to me when I look at your trajectory, I look at the events.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you're doing design ops even before it was a thing.
Sure.
So that's just the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah. So my career started in events. Even before I went to college, I was organizing concerts and stuff for me and my buddies. I don't know why. It's just it's probably it probably comes from I really like being around people. I'm probably an ambivert, but that wasn't always the case. I was like a hardcore extrovert for a long time. So if I could go out, hang out with my buddies, that's great. If I can hang out with my buddies, even better. So yeah, I found myself organizing events when I was really young. I grew up playing some music, if you can see the synthesizer in the background, and started playing concerts and stuff, just like neighborhood stuff. And it kind of started there. And so when I got to college, it was the same thing of how do I find my people? And I just went to the center place in the university that was organizing all the major events. And I started volunteering when I was a freshman, eventually became the major concerts programmer for the university. And that led to a whole lot of other stuff. So I probably kept going back to events because it was a thing that I knew could help, bring people together. It's there was always these moments, whether it's a company or community thing, but everyone typically gets together at these things and we call those events. And I really thought that was really cool to actually organize those things. So yeah, that's carried forward all the way to now, where I'm still organizing stuff at the DesignOps Assembly and stuff at Google. This is just kind of my go-to.
And this is really mind-blowing. You're saying that, you've been always fascinated by doing things that, that involve people. And to me, it means that if you're dealing so much with people, would it be fair to say that one needs to have a high amount of emotional intelligence? So were you always emotionally intelligent, I would say, or was that something you just picked up along the way?
Yeah.
Because I've struggled with it a lot.
I'd say reading people and EQ it's something that I was born with a natural strength for. I have plenty of other weaknesses. There's not a whole lot of things that are naturally, strong to me. I've had to develop a lot of my skills over the years. But that one, reading people, I would say for a while was both a superpower and a kryptonite. I probably cared too much about what people thought, whether it's about me or about other people. And so it was, superpower in a total weakness. But yeah, over time, I've learned how to harness it a little bit. It's still something that I'm still trying to figure out how to get better at. I would say that carries through to something, which is something I've had a hard time doing for a long time, is saying no, because I'm also kind of a bit of a people pleaser. So those two things I think are really closely correlated, right? Is having to understand when I should be saying no versus saying yes. And also just naturally kind of being in tune with what people are feeling, even if their words maybe contradict that.
I come from the opposite spectrum. Last year, this main year, my active focus is just getting better at being more emotionally intelligent. I'll tell you a short story, like just a quick fun fact. So I was at this event, and the head of design is coming in, and I'm at this like hotel where the whole thing is happening, right? And this head of design walks in, and I'm so excited that hey, this is an opportunity. In my head, it's like an opportunity to just chat with this person and build a connection, and all the whole 9 yards. That I talked to this person, and they're talking to me, and I'm just trying to like continue the conversation, and this friend of mine next to me literally drags me away, like I'm saying, like physically drags me away, and then he's like, "Dude, did you see that person's face? They're exhausted. They had their bag next to them, which means they came from the airport, and they want to check into the room and relax, and you're trying to like strike up this conversation, and I get what you're doing. So that's why I asked you that question, because like I'm getting better at it, but like definitely if I had met you in person like earlier in the year or last year, I would have definitely struggled with, like, if you had said to me in passing that, hey, Janelle, I probably got to run in a bit, I just would have kind of ignored it. Not in a bad way, but it's just like I would have been so like obsessed about trying to build a relationship with you that I would forget everything else.
Yeah. I think a lot of us naturally have blinders on, right? When we want to do a thing in the world. I mean, humans just aren't rational actors, right? It's not like we put in a point and get out the thing that we're anticipating. There's so much stuff going on in the background, how many open tabs that they've got going on at any given time, let alone if they're even looking at the one that I'm looking at, right? Like we all just have stuff that's on our mind at all times. So yeah, just trying to kind of like take off the blinders before we start a conversation generally helped.
And I feel like, and this is my guess, again, I'm not in design ops, so I probably am leaning more on you. This is where like I'm trying to get your expertise on this. To me, it seems like if someone wants to pursue a career in design ops, having moderate to a little bit above average amount of people reading skills or emotional intelligence would be important. And the reason I say that is because when I look at design ops, it's also design, but it's design for enabling other designers. So like, for example, if you have a traditional designer, that's more about like, let me create that app, let me create this amazing visual. It's more about like the actual design work. But when I think about design ops, to me, it's like, how can we design something that enables other designers at scale, whether that's a process, whether that's an event like you're talking about? What is your take on that?
Yeah, unpack the question a little bit more. So you're asking, are you asking like a, kind of at the core of design ops, or what's the question?
So to me, like, so it's just two part. One is, to me, I feel like design ops is more about like designing that enables people. Like, would it be fair to say that, like, instead of designing apps and stuff, it's more of like, how can I design something that enables other designers?
Yeah. I think we'll stop there. So what design ops to me is everything that requires design to work at scale, or maybe not even at scale, but design to work than a business, right? Since that's where most of us are doing design. If I'm a team of one, it probably doesn't matter as much about like codifying my design language or my design process, because really however you get from idea to the thing that users are going to use and that's going to help the business really doesn't matter, right? There are efficiencies in there that, if I'm a team of one, if I'm freelancing, things I can generally do to like, up my billable rate, because I'm spending way less time to get to it as long as I'm not charging hourly. But as teams grow and as more people get into that ecosystem of like, how does a product get made here? How do we design? The necessity for systems, for a codified language, all of these things that require design to work well at scale. One, that gets to be harder because there's more people, there's more systems, there's more tools, there's just more stuff, right? So the more that all of these components have to agree with each other is more important. And then because generally we're dealing with people, everyone has different working styles too. So it's not just about like finding an efficient way of doing things. It's about finding the efficient way that works for a particular company within that particular context at time, right? So it's not like we can build up a systems for like, how do we design here? And then it's done and it's a playbook and it's minted and it's published for everyone to self-service forever. The reality is like organizations change over time, and how we end up designing is, yes, can be looked at kind of on these large waypoints. Let's say on like every year, we kind of figure out how we should standardize our design operations within a company. But there's also a continuous way of looking at that as well, right? So getting really close to the systems is just part of it. That's kind of what we've been hampering on, is like, what's the actual act of designing? We call that practice operations. There's a whole separate side of design operations, all about like organizations, people support. How do we recruit? With the actual like employee experience life cycle here, there's all these different components of what this means. And again, at a small team, some of the stuff is just happening in the background and it doesn't really require a whole lot of like active attention to it unless it's mission critical, unless it's like really slowing you down. But all of these things matter the larger that you get. And so that's why you see like a small agency, you might have a few producers doing design operations work. And at a place like Google, you'll have, hundreds of people who are doing this stuff because there's full-time jobs for certain components of design operations, such as like.
And what might those functions be? Like just to get an idea, like let's say if I'm a design ops professional at a Fortune 500 company, what are some of the tasks that you could describe that a design ops person would do?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter the seniority level, just to kind of get an idea.
It's a good question. So what I like to do is I like to take design ops as kind of it's a large umbrella. Underneath it, I think that there's two sides of it: practice operations and org operations. Practice operations has to do with, the actual work of design. How can we optimize the efficiency and efficacy of that craft, right? And for a long time, to your earlier point, there's been a lot of tension on like the actual craft of design, let's say like the pixel level of designing. But as far as like, how do we codify our language and how do we make sure that PMs know how to work with us, that engineers know how to work with us, that our design process is embedded in the larger product development workflow at the right exact times, all that stuff. That's kind of all in practice ops, as it has to do with the actual way that we are designing products within an organization. Within that is typically things like design program management, or an agency, this is called design production, right? And that's kind of where the entire craft started. It's like you'll have a design producer in a squad or a product team, and they're really just making sure that everyone's hitting their goals on time and they're advocating for the design function of that squad. So that's kind of like a very specific example on the practice ops side of around some of the day-to-day. They're probably opening up Jira, they're managing all the tickets, they're making sure that everything is written the right way, and that the hose is not kinked up anywhere. And if it is, that they are typically if the hose is kinked up, it's like a people problem, right? So that producer will actually go talk to the people to make sure that it can get unkinked. If it's a systems thing, they can deal with that too.
And I've worked with like a design producer like that. They would basically set up all the meetings, the ceremonies with the engineers, with the product managers, everything basically such that only thing I needed to worry about was just going in my Figma and doing my designs.
Yeah, exactly.
And everything else, like the communication, everything else that was related to that communication, ceremonies, giving out updates, getting new timelines, getting meetings set up, like everything was just handled by the senior design producer that we had. And all I could just focus on at that point, thankfully, was just doing the design work.
Yeah, you hit probably a more simple point, which is a better place to go to, honestly. I think it was like 2019, 2020, Workday famously came out with a state of the industry report. And they had pegged that like something like 60% of a designer's time was spent doing non-design tasks. there's tons of reports out there that are like this. So pick your one, but the whole point is like designers are doing a lot of non-design activities because it's just the necessity of booking meetings, changing stuff around. But if we have a specialist to work on those things, on the operations of design, then the designer can actually worry about doing their function, the thing that they've been training their entire life to do really, really well. So it's just the entire idea of specialty. I think the nerd word for it is Taylorism, right? It's just like take a scientific approach and embed them into business. So now we have a specialist to do that stuff so that it doesn't just totally burn out our designer. And that's only on the practice ops side. The same idea goes on the org ops side. So to give you more specifics on that side, it's things that like generally lean more towards like leadership support. So chief of staff, I would actually bucket over an org ops. So like, how are we supporting leadership? There's people and culture, components of it as well. We talked about hiring, firing, onboarding, like what's our employee experience program? Typically that's owned by HR. I find that it's actually better if a design ops person is informing that, because designers are a little unique as to how we are recruited and retained at a company. And then like, how does the entire organization come together to stay informed? Is that a newsletter? Do we do AMAs, firesides, panel events, like the internal events for what creates our ability to co-create our culture together? That's also should be led by somebody. And right now there's a real hot conversation like, should that be the design ops job or is that the design leader job? To be honest, it doesn't really matter who's doing it as long as somebody is very specifically tagged with driving that responsibility.
The way I look at it is when I look at the two sides, the practice side of things in design ops and then the org side of things, if I may, to me, it seems like if someone's looking to transition into design ops, they would probably start out first on a more junior role on the practice side of things. And then maybe the people in the org side, leadership would be someone way more seasoned like you. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think there's just more entry points or lateral transition points over into production for a lot of reasons. One's like, there's a reason why most of the practice started on that side, right? That is the low-hanging fruit for business needs, because building products is incredibly hard. And the squad model is, theoretically, there's book written about it. There's all sorts of papers and blogs about there, but it's still very difficult to create like a really well-balanced product team or a really high effective squad. So that makes there's typically a business case for a producer. It's a little harder to make a business case on things that are just harder to track, let alone like tag attribution to my energy points as an employee on things like how satisfied are designers here. That's a really big problem that there's probably never a silver bullet answer to solve for. But to your point, it probably takes a little bit more experience. It helps if there's somebody that has a little bit more cycles, that they've seen like the ups and downs of an economy, and they've kind of they've been in a company working and just seen like, what does expansion look like? And what does contraction look like? And how do we create a good place to work than, all those different environments? So I wouldn't say that like more experience equals a better org ops leader, but it probably helps to lean on more context so that you can make more informed decisions. So yeah, that's probably why we just see more entry level roles on the design production side, on the practice ops side versus like, people operations, junior or something like that.
So I'm trying to think about like someone's listening to this or someone's watching this and they're like, you know what? I think I'm kind of curious about this design ops. I wonder if I should pursue a career in it. And then I'm just going to throw like a bunch of questions, like not rapid fire, but just kind of like try to put myself in their shoes and think about what questions they might have.
Sure.
So the first question would be, do I have to be previously a designer, right? Like a practicing designer or have done some design to even consider a career in design ops?
Yeah. No. I was not a product designer. There's a lot of design ops folks that I think, to your earlier point that you were starting to tease out, there's a lot of people that come from events. I'm one of them. I had I wouldn't call it a failed time, but a really short time designing in a producer role. I was just a very slow designer. Our direction was okay. It wasn't great. But like, yeah, I can argue that I came from design, but I really didn't. Came from systems and org and events previously to that. So there's a ton of folks that I know just like me as well who didn't come from design. there's also, I would say like half of the industry come from that side, and they just like the different challenge of like designing a design org is really cool, right? To be able to come in and solve all the pain points that they have felt as a designer. So I think that motivates, for a lot of good reasons, designers that may be just looking for something new. But for everyone who's kind of like me, design's also been that like one of those functions I've always looked at and like, damn, those are the cool kids. It just like, very interesting people here, and they all seem pretty human. My previous life, like I came from like suits and ties and, a little bit of like kind of wearing a mask into work. And some of that exists in corporate America, right? Everywhere, corporate, wherever. But it's less so here. And it's much more of just like humans identifying as humans and identifying as like, they generally like making things that people use, and design's a great craft for that. So, no, I think you get a lot of different shapes and sizes of backgrounds of who becomes a design operator. To no surprise, knowing about the craft of design is a huge advantage. So of course, you're going to see more of those people kind of get through one of those first filters, which is finding a place for them to actually do good value exchange between their skills and the discipline. But then there's other people like me. I think of like Taylor Oliva, who's head of design ops at Instacart and very outspoken. She is not a designer, and she found design ops because she likes the people, she loves the industry, and she wants to be able to help.
So you don't have to be a Figma expert, like the most advanced
right?
Figma
Yeah,
designer.
No, not at all. Plenty of people don't understand the tools here. It's going to be an advantage to know all these things, right? But yeah, you don't need to come from design.
In terms of personalities, like for example, I have some friends who are accountants. And then when you want to go in that field, you have to be very like laser focused. You got to love numbers. You got to be like, like getting into Excel sheets. Those are things that are required if you want to be an accountant. That's what I've, got the vibe when I talk to my accountant friends. So if someone's considering a career in design ops, what are some personalities or some traits that you would say they should think about if they have that or not? Because if they have that, it would just make their life in this field much more easier.
Yeah. I'd say it comes down to 3 critical skills that if you don't have them, to consider developing them, or like take a free course online and just see if it's interesting to you. One of them is systems thinking. Everything that you're going to be, the problem spaces that you're going to be thrown at are very rarely in an individual level. Yes, sometimes there's like just some therapists that comes with the job. We'll talk about that in a second. But most of the time, for you to actually say, I have a hypothesis on an area of the business that we can improve, and you measure out your XYZ. If we do X, it's going to cost Y and we're going to get Z, which everything boils down to that. And that's really ultimately where you're reporting your retros on, has to do something like that. Systems thinking is typically going to be the thing that is required to do all that stuff well. Number 2 is going to be how much you like working with people. This is not like, you can't just get in a closed off room and do your job well. A lot of this job has to do with actually supporting the craft itself, which means getting to know your people at a pretty, I wouldn't say like, you just have to get to know them fairly well, right?
Like talking to them, getting feedback from them.
These are your users. So you have to understand them front to back. You have to understand them from a quantitative standpoint, meaning like be able to understand the data on things like surveys, whether that's Glint surveys or satisfaction surveys. But there's that side of it. But there's also the quality side, which like just spending time with these folks.
So I have to be a decent listener, somewhat, like hearing what they're saying.
Yeah. I'd say it's just like, you don't necessarily love people, but if you don't like people, this probably isn't the job for you, right? You have to at least be neutral. So systems thinking.
Because you can't go in your silo just to design thing. That's why you're saying that, because you can't just suddenly go in your silo and just work on your artifact and not talk to people and just come out.
Correct. Yes. Systems thinking, general, I don't know what you want to call it, like just people. You have to generally like people. And then the third is not to use a design term, but the idea of design thinking, just the general double diamond of divergence and convergence helps you just relate more with your people of who you're servicing, but also that way of problem solving is just it's gonna help you here quite a bit in terms of figuring out how to size your thinking. So if I find, let's say in one of those first 2 buckets, either a systems problem that I can go solve for, or a pretty large like people problem that I have to solve for, then applying the design thinking approach into anything in there is going to be a huge advantage for me. Even using that language that's buried within the design thinking frameworks to present the problems and then get buy-in on those problems, and then, just kind of formulate my entire approach. That's going to help. Having those three things, I think, are a great starting point. And you don't necessarily need to be a great system thinker to start, but doing some studying there would help. You don't have to be a certified design thinker to start, but going to take IBM's free course right now, probably not a bad place to start. Knowing people, you kind of just listen to your gut if this is for you or not, even just when I say those words. That's more of a binary gate.
Yeah. So I totally get the part about you got to like somewhat enjoy working with people, listening to them, getting feedback from them. But the first and third part you talked about, systems thinking, like design thinking. I'm going to try to like just use layman terms. And just for a second, like I may be inaccurate. I might be just like bouncing off it. Just bear with me. Would it be fair to say like this person has to somewhat love processes, creating processes, and thinking about how this process that I can create can help remove the roadblocks for designers? Would that be like a very vague way of putting it in some way? Like loving structure, processes and stuff?
The word love kind of scares me a little bit because I know some phenomenal program managers and design operators who they will say like right away, like, I hate process. Like it's, like God. A capital, like it's the P word. They're allergic to it. So there are really successful, I know this might be a little confusing. Let me throw out a few other words. And then the point is that you can triangulate as a professional on some of these things and probably find a niche to do really well. And it might have nothing to do with process. So here's some of the skills. And I'm looking over the screen. We teach these courses in the DesignOps Assembly called Learning Labs. This is a crowdsourced bucket of tags that all of our students have used to describe. Some of them are established leaders, by the way. Some are emerging and some are new to the field. But here are some of the top tags: public speaking, strategic thinking, design thinking, service design, persuasion, communication, facilitation, project management, program management, systems thinking, and collaboration. Those are the big tags that everyone goes to. So on the practice ops side of things, or on the org ops side, there's always processes that can be improved. So to answer your question, yeah, there is a total flavor of professionals within design ops who, if you love process, there are so many problems that you're going to be able to solve for at companies. If you don't like process, though, you can probably still have a huge impact on a team because there's other things that can help you codify a language that have nothing to do with process or intake or, or efficiency stuff. Those are broadly going to be around efficacy, right? How well is something being done? Sometimes that can be a process-related thing, and sometimes it's not.
And I love how you phrase it. You're saying that, and I think I'm going to start using this more. You said that you don't have to love it. Let's not use the L word, but you have to be neutral about it. So if someone really just, like, I'm going to use a strong word, hates process, or even setting up a process, or like, I've met people like that are just like, oh my God, they will run away 100 miles. If you just say that you got to like set up some kind of framework process and they just hate it. I guess then that's something to think about. Like, can they get to a neutral point where they still can somewhat work with it or set it up?
I've worked with plenty of design leaders, by the way, who are like, don't ever say the P word here. And it's one of those things. It's like, okay, I won't say process, I'll say workflow. We're talking about the same thing. You know, like there is, even if it's nonlinear, we start a thing and then we end it.
Yeah.
I would call that process. Like there are waypoints we're getting through. So to that point, kind of a secondary layer to all this, we mentioned a whole lot of the critical skills. Change management is probably the most invisible but important dimension to be good at this job, because everything you do is not just like laying down the hammer on like a new playbook or a process. That's the easy part. The harder part is getting people to adopt it.
Oh my God.
And so that's everything to this job. And I would argue that's probably the same thing for a design leader more broadly, but for design operators, it's less about like documenting our current state so much as saying we have all agreed that there is a to-be state that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And I've figured out, I've kind of like stabilized where we are now, built all these systems, blah, 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 blah. But we all want to make like a better place. So what's my specific function in making that happen?
And to get people to adopt this new way of working or making this change, as I said, with change management, it again involves working with people, listening to them. If they're not implementing or doing this change, kind of figuring out, talking to them why, what's going on, what can be better.
Yeah.
I see your point.
Yeah, I'd say like that's been my trick, right? Because I've again, I felt like an outsider for a real long time, and in many respects, I still do. But my secret weapon, because EQ comes just a little bit more natural to me, is just to get to find friends in wherever I'm trying to go to, someone who's already there, and getting them to share their story, their successes, their tactics. So I'll often lean on people that are smarter than me or better than me, or maybe they emulate, a model of success or a place that we're trying to get to, and I'll just try and invite them in to just share some of their story as to how they got there. And then a lot of people will be able to find like a real world example, or they'll be able to hook into that experience a lot better than I will be able to help them in some like abstract, fuzzy place of like, yeah, we want to get to this, even if we have like really clear objective and key result, spit on initiatives and yada, yada, yada. Having a story, something that people can relate to, is way more powerful, in my opinion. I've seen a lot more people resonate with their colleagues' stories than they have in like some flag on top of a mountain that a leader throws down.
Something I'm curious about. No, that's just amazing. I'm just kind of like thinking about now that for designers, usually the path is you have a junior designer and a senior designer. Then you can either choose to stay on the craft and you kind of go the individual contributor route, or you go into management. So it's kind of like from there, either you become a manager or a staff designer, then do principal, from manager to director. So those are like your standard designer career path. And I'm kind of wondering, what does that career path or trajectory look like for someone just starting out or thinking of transitioning to design ops? What would that career path be for them?
Yeah. So let's take ladders, since that's kind of how you're framing it. There's probably like 7 or maybe 8 different levels. On the IC path, you can go anywhere from like, let's say, junior producer, which you're probably going to be starting off in like actual practice operations. So that's your entry level role. There's not a ton of them out there for org ops side. Sometimes there are, and they might be framed as like junior specialist. But then there's, the actual, let's call it like L2, would be kind of that true producer roles. L3 would then be like a more senior role where you're trying to take on not just like central teams, production, velocity, and maybe efficiencies and efficacies, but you're starting to work on like multiple teams. That'd be like a step up. Maybe you're producing a much more strategically important team that's more complex in nature. Tons of examples out there. If you just think of like any huge product, I can't talk about Google on here. So let's take like Bing search. That's a very complicated product. And I imagine it has a lot of different producers on there. The next layer up
would use this Bing. No, just kidding.
Next layer up would probably be like more like portfolio support. And that's where, you're probably at like the top end of actual like IC work. And then where you probably bounce from there is going to be like managing other design program managers, other design producers. Wow. There's really only like 2 more, maybe 3 more rungs as to depend on how you slice it. Then you kind of go into like practice leadership. So how am I actually managing the entire operations muscle? That's kind of where it ends usually. Sometimes, though, there's another elevated version of this. I'll give a very specific example. Zillow, they've got a VP of design operations. Super rare. I think there's got to be less than 10 of these in the world right now. But at that level, something has changed, which is not only are you working on these 2 things that I've talked about a lot, efficiencies, efficacies, you're starting to work on like a third bucket for what ops can do for the entire practice, which is how can we, through an operational lens, become a strategic differentiator to all of the other design teams. And if you can do that well, your ops practice is actually going to be quite a bit more mature than all the other ops practices out there, but you're probably a lot more defensible, because at that layer, then you're actually like, you're finding a way to stand out compared to, let's say, like the top companies that are compensating like the top 10% of comp bands around the world. Let's say you're at a company that maybe is only offering 70%. So if that was in the 90%, you're down at like the 70. You're saying, as a design ops team, we are actually doing things that are allowing us to recruit employees with a shorter time to hire, retain more employees to keep them there longer. It's a big question of like, well, what's the value proposition? Why are people staying there? Compensation matters. It's not everything. And a company would start to realize that the ops team was actually making that happen. Great examples of this are things like flexible like tooling strategies. Designers love their tools. Some people will attribute like a poor tool stack is a reason why they leave a company. More often than not, it's actually cross-functional partnerships. So cross-functional partnerships is an amazing thread that we should probably save for a whole nother show, or for somebody else who can speak to it more confidently. The reason why I bring up cross-functional partnerships is design operations is not typically, but when it's done well, they have a full-on strategy to like really make that cross-functional partnership a value proposition, a strength for a team versus like top frustration, which we know from like a lot of state of reports, industry benchmarking reports, that cross-functional partnerships is really difficult. So if you can get up to that like L7, that VP level of a design ops leader, you're probably not just crushing it on efficiencies, on efficacies, but you're also starting to like kind of figure out what the cutting edge of the practices so that you can make the design team just like a better place to work. Very few people have figured out how to do that. That's kind of why I think that design ops is kind of the darling child of the design industry right now, is because more people are starting to not only figure this out, tell the story really, really loudly. The reason I'm even able to reference Zillow is because they're committed to not only up-leveling their design organization through design ops specifically, but to tell that story on their blogs, at conferences, and stuff like that. So,
wow. So let's talk about some numbers. So, for example, like I'm based in Dallas, Texas, and like if I'm just throwing out rough ballparks. I mean, the actual number might vary, but if there's a junior designer just breaking in, I think they can expect somewhere around $70,000 starting salary. If they become a little bit senior, you're looking at $100,000 or more, and then it kind of goes up from there. So if someone's just breaking into let's say the practice side of design ops, probably more likely, or entry point for most individuals, what salary numbers can they even expect? Just rough ballpark, very rough high.
Yeah, kind of tough because it really depends on where they are in the world. I would say more than anything, it depends on where you are in the world and the company size that you're at. Those are,
let's say Fortune 500 company in the US, like a big company, 100, 200 designers, probably most likely.
Okay. Yeah. Let's splice it up in like 3 different levels in this hypothetical. Let's take San Francisco. 100 people. That means you probably have, let's give a very specific example. If there's 100 design operators and you're operating on your typical ratios of like 1 to 20, I'd have a team of 5. 3 of them might be producers. 1 of them might be managing the producers. And then 1 of them might be like a chief of staff, head of design ops. Let's take those producers for a second. They're probably going to be oscillating somewhere between like 110 and 160, depending on, because they might not all be the exact level. 110 to 160. Let's say it's somewhere in there. For a manager of them, probably like 160 to 190. And then the head of design ops, low 200s. The larger the practice, the more levels that you get. And there's probably like more maturity and pay parity between the design ops function and product ops or TPMs. And so hold on really quick.
What are you saying, the base pay?
The base, yes. Yeah. Well, no, I'm talking kind of like total take home comp.
Okay, got it. Just making sure.
I will say, I know that there are a non-insignificant amount of design operators who are making in the high 6s, if not breaking a mil. I know this because I've seen these surveys.
Wait.
Yes, it is
breaking a mil.
It is not like this is
not an error. Oh my god!
This can be a very well paid industry.
Wow.
I had seen those numbers about a year ago, and that's really what changed my perspective. It's also all over the place. You can also get really specific. For anyone that's listening, go to the State of Design Ops report. I think it's design. If you just Google it, State of Design Ops report, it has the exact salary breakdowns that are in there. It's mostly between the United States and Europe. But that 110 to 160 number, a lot of folks in the West agree and can identify with those numbers. I think very few people understand what the top end outliers are. and they're there and they are pretty substantial. I know for sure that there's at least 10 teams that have leaders that are making more than $500,000 every year. And I think that this is also like a very, I think it's a much bigger number than we realize, because the people that are answering these surveys are typically not the folks from like any of the top comp bands. I've seen the back end numbers of them, and I'm surprised by the companies that are reporting those numbers. Does that make sense? Because I'm like, oh, and I don't even want to say them on here, but like, we know
Yes.
The ones that are always referenced as like top of the market. And those were not the ones that were reporting those numbers. So
yes,
maybe there are dozens of teams of like
Wow.
design ops leaders that I just don't know about that are bringing home crazy money. But seeing that gave me a lot of hope, because I've come from like typically smaller teams, my own businesses. I was surprised by it. I was shocked by it, honestly.
What about job opportunity and just security? And what I mean by that is, as a designer, I know that there's so many designer roles out there. Like, I'm just talking about individual contributor roles. Like, there's probably staff designer, senior designer role somewhere that I know that, okay, if something were to happen, touch wood, it doesn't, I can always, go for an interview and get a job. So given that the number of design ops folks at a company might be like lesser than the actual number of designers, how do you view the job security perspective, or like the amount of jobs out there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I don't have a crystal ball, so it's kind of tough to say how secure the industry is a decade from now. This also might be like, it might be somewhat transient, if that makes sense. The entire industry is transitioning, and we don't know which jobs are going to be phased out by tech, by better technology in the future.
Yep.
So let's take over the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I would say high confidence for a few reasons. One, design is generally just by headcount and demand still growing. And we can see that from almost every aspect. We hear it from HR that they can't find enough good talent out there. We hear it from design leaders to say we can't find enough good designers out there. We also look at maturity reports that are out there, whether it's a new design frontier, it's a little outdated. But McKinsey, Adobe, we look at all of these maturity reports, and we do see teams are ever so slightly tracking from like the low levels of maturity to mid-maturity. And we still see that a small minority of teams are of high maturity. Why does that matter? The entire correlation of maturity, all that really means is like business value, meaning if I'm a company and I'm investing into this muscle of design, and I'll get to design ops in a second, but this is really important. I know what I'm getting out of it, right? What we have seen everywhere is that companies continue to invest more into this practice because it's yielding better business results. As long as that trend continues, there's going to be another truth, which is almost none of these design leaders went to school and got their MBAs, that they understand operations at scale. So they're going to hire specialists to do those roles. Probably for the next decade, this is going to be a high, an in-demand role. The caveat to that is that there's probably not a whole lot of junior roles. We don't see a ton of them now. And I'm not sure if we're going to see a ton of them in the future. I have my reasons, and it's all speculation, so there's probably no point in talking about it. But what we do know is that there are not a whole lot of junior design ops roles out there. Why? It's because
So how does one break in?
Typically a lateral jump within a company. We hear a lot of stories where there are no design ops teams, but people are doing this at like their 20% of their time, or, companies have all sorts of different programs to allow for innovation. And we see a lot of designers will take on problems that like pains them to be able to do a job well. And that turns into a job later. That's a very common entry point. It's just like doing these activities and then making a business case to actually turn that into a job. Where I will find is like, we should stop there, because a lot of people like don't know how to do that. And if they found template, for example, maybe the design MBA can create one. It might actually see like quite a bit more of a conversion from like side of this work into full-time stuff. People like it, and all they're really missing out on is like, how do I frame this as a business case? Which we are approached about a lot in the DesignOps Assembly for help on that stuff. So we do like a lot of one-to-one coaching on that specific dimension. I'm curious how much that's out there. But that's a lateral way to get in. Another way.
Let me stop right there. So you're saying that you're an active partner in DesignOps Assembly, and you're saying that you at DesignOps Assembly, a lot of folks who are looking to make a lateral move, you coach them and help them get there. How can they find out more information about it? They just it can contact you, or they just go to the DesignOps Assembly website?
Yeah, I'd say just like get in. We don't have like an official program. We're not selling anything. It's just a problem that we know that people are trying to figure out is like, how do I turn this into a business case? And there's not a lot of Medium blogs out there for that. So I would say just like jump into the DOA, DesignOpsAssembly.com. You can request to join the Slack. Once you're in the Slack, all of the basic channels you get dropped into, they're all great spots to just ask that question, and someone generally will help. Back to your other question of like,
and it's free to join the community?
Yeah, totally free. Just jump on in.
Got it.
I don't know. There might be a future when we charge for certain aspect membership, but we try to keep this thing open for as long as we can. So I would say just jump in.
Gotcha.
I'll shorten the answer, but I really want to like touch how do you actually get in here? You can create your own, essentially like your own job. If you're already at a company and this doesn't exist, go in and pitch this to your leader, and you can just figure out like very specific aspects of the job. You're going to do design ops for everything. You're going to approach this one very specific problem, whether it's production or people ops or whatever. Another one is just go talk to design ops leaders, like literally go into LinkedIn and just search heads of design ops and find some time with them. And just like, let's say you want to go work for a specific company, go talk to that design ops leader. Most teams right now are increasing budget and headcount. We know this from the last State of Design Ops report that we just did. Budgets are increasing, headcounts are increasing, jobs don't always get posted publicly, or at least like an easy to find place. So I would say just like organically go find it. And the third one is just set up keyword searches in like a Google, for example, and just get notified anytime that a new design ops, design operations, design program manager, or design production job gets posted. It could be one of those four. Or design ops specialist. So those are my piece of advice. These three roads. Yeah.
In terms of breaking in, totally makes sense. What questions? I'm trying to like figure out. Like, so usually everyone has some sort of factors. Like, for example, as a designer, when I'm interviewing, different companies, one of the things I look for is how involved is that design team in the community, or if their head of design is involved in the community. That's just a metric that I look for. I'm not saying that's the way to look for. That's one thing I look for. I ask questions to kind of gauge basically how mature is the design practice here. Do they like have a head of design there, a VP of design, just kind of get some ideas. So what questions would you recommend that folks who are looking to make break into the design ops industry kind of ask the companies they're targeting, just to kind of gauge how mature the design ops practice is?
Yeah, I think an easy one is like, how do you measure design operations success at your company? Because that answer will tell you so much. Like, we don't. Okay, there's opportunity to help.
Okay.
Or we do, and we measure by X. What that does, if they say no, it tells me a whole story about like the maturity. Probably they might be like a complicated team, in a decentralized model doing all these things, but they might be a fully reactive team. What I'm really interested in is a proactive team. So an organization that has figured out what to say yes to and what to say no to. To me, that says that they have a strategy, that they've slowed down and said, this is the type of team that we want to be, the type of team that we've agreed to be right now, the type of team that we're expanding into be. If I can ask that single question of how to measure, the success of your organization, it tells me so much stuff. If no, a lot of opportunity, probably like a fairly low mature team. If yes, it also tells me the thing that they're measuring, because that's the thing that the business is probably, it should be at least tracking their success on. And if it's something that's not a vanity metric, that's really exciting. If it's several things, if they have like a dashboard, they're like, here's how we're assessing like the health of our practice operations by these figures. And we're assessing the health of our people operations with these figures. That's really exciting to me, because I can jump in, and that's probably on like the cutting edge of the entire ops practice. Very few teams, I think, could answer that in a comprehensive way, because the things that I've been on the inside of organizations where I couldn't say yes, because like I didn't have a strong relationship with product, or I didn't have a strong relationship with data. So I couldn't pull. If I can say yes and I have these dashboards, that's so exciting. Then I'm in a place where I can like really jump in and actually push the edges of the field a little bit. Because I really firmly believe that this is like totally early days, not to be too Amazonian, but it does feel like it's day one, maybe like day 2 tops. Just because the entire craft of design is going to get far more complicated in the next few years with AI. And I ask this question all the time, which is like, what is the design ops leader role when we automate so much, or we like partner more with machine learning to create things that users want? It's a really cool world to be in. And so trying to like future-proof my job to figure out how can I be in a valuable position in that world, whether it's like 10 years down the line, 25. I want to be part of that discussion. So I'm trying to figure out like what are the general buckets that are going to be involved there. But back to your main question, most teams aren't measuring success at all. So like tons of work to be done there.
You know, my eyes lit up when you said future-proofing my job, because that's something I'm always obsessed about, having gone through so many layoffs in my career. My short answer to that is side hustles, like hedging the bets.
Yeah, totally.
Just in general, whether you're a designer or design ops, it doesn't matter. That's something that I, try to do just to make sure that if something were to go down, like there's like diversified sources of income, there's separate things going on, just so that it doesn't impact me that drastically.
And the cool thing too is that there's tons of side hustles that design ops people can do that is going to make them stronger as design operators. Almost every single business that's out there has an operational component to them. And it's like, we talked a lot about efficiencies and efficacies. That's all within the context of designing or design orgs. But those two things happen in businesses everywhere. You can start up a side hustle and like try and get better at a certain skill that we mentioned, any of those big tags, and just apply the side hustle, and you're going to be stronger as a result. I know it's worked for me too, because I used to be a pretty big generalist, and those side hustles helped me find my specialty for sure.
Wow, dude, I'm getting this epiphany, and I want your gut check on it if this is right or wrong. But it's almost like if you're in design ops, you're almost kind of like learning, like on the ground, how to be like a chief operating officer, because you're doing a lot of things at once, and that skill could translate to joining a startup or a business where you're kind of just like managing a lot of things, kind of like what a CEO does.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I've asked this question to a bunch of other design ops leaders, like, where do you want your what's the end state? And there's three typical responses. One of them is to the fork of like, owning their own agency and their own thing. And that's great because all these skills are going to help them do that way better, whether it's managing a team or systems design. The other two are in-house, and that's one of them is the route of like the design leader. I want to become the chief design officer. Great. This is one way to get there. The other one, more rare, and I'm kind of surprised that it's more rare because it seems more obvious, but it's exactly what you just said. It's like, I want to lead operations for the team. I want to lead product operations. I want to lead, other operations. And they use this as a way to get in deep into skill, into some seniority and internal respect, and then they lateral transfer over.
Wow. Damn.
It's cool.
I just love the inside bombs you just dropped. How can folks listening or watching this interview right now get in touch with you? I'm a bit quieter than I used to be, but I still throw my thoughts out on Twitter. Sometimes it's about crypto stuff, sometimes about ops stuff. I'm at Adam Fry Pierce on Twitter. But the place where I'd love people to go is hang out with us in the DesignOps Assembly. That's where we do a lot of obviously this stuff. Is we just kind of talk about things design operations. So that's at DesignOpsAssembly.com. And it's free to join. Come in there, join us. There's tons of stuff. If you want to join any of our education programs, those are out there as well. So if this is something that you really want to learn more of the language about and partner up with coaches and stuff like that, we've got a good program for that. If you're a bit more self-serviced, the DesignOps Slack that we have is pretty huge and it's really active. It was really helpful for me before I was a partner. I was just a participant and I was trying to figure out kind of this modern chapter that we're in of design ops. And I would say it cut my learning maybe by a full year. How did you do that? How did that happen? So you were from participant to becoming an active partner in that side of things, that business. How did that happen? You just volunteered, told them that, hey, I love what you're doing and I can help out, or?
Well, yeah, this kind of goes back to something that you said earlier, which is another way of doing, future-proofing your job is side hustles, right? I've always had side hustles. Sometimes they were my main hustle. But over the last few years, as I've been in this chapter where I've really had this in-house focus, that's my day job. I still have had a few things on the side. I hit a point during the pandemic where I had like 4 things going on and it was like crushing me. So I like stopped doing pretty much all the ones that didn't have any value to them. And I had some extra time and I knew that I was making this much more aggressive path into design operations. I'd done some like internal soul searching about what was important to me. And I knew Meredith and Elise, they're the co-founders, and I saw their business and I just had this simple question, which is like, hey, are you interested in monetizing so that we can get more funds to make this thing even bigger? And I'd done other community businesses in the past, and that was usually my focus. It was like trying to figure out partnerships, how to bring money in, something that didn't like totally throw an ad, at the community and like kind of make it go gross. My belief on like sales and business development is like, if you're ever going to agree to a big new partnership, that it actually is a good thing for everybody. So I took that same philosophy for them. I said, I think that there's plenty of partners out there that can help us make this a stronger community so that we can do things like certificates and like creating like a central language of like books and reports, all these things that we know that are important to us as practitioners. And I was a little surprised. I said, yeah, like go ahead and create the business case for us. And so I did that. I actually have like a Miro file that I walked them through and they said, yes, totally. And, if you fast forward on that was only a year ago. And we're now a revenue generating business, and we take all that money and we put it right back into our community mission, which is to standardize the entire practice. So and we think education is a huge part of it, because there are people, there are even teams that are hiring design ops professionals, and they're using different words for the same exact job. Design ops, DesOps, DOps, design operations. Like there's 50 words to talk about the same thing. And we're trying to make this easier on everybody.
Adam, just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm not sure how wise it was, but it was fun talking. So thank you for having me.